Lotfullah, how did this crisis come about, and how do you see this playing out now? Why did this crisis come about?
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's very good to be here, and I must say it's an honor for me to be in Lahore and share the panel with friends. I think what happened in Afghanistan is indeed a very important question, but I think the more important question is that what are we going to do with it now? And to briefly say that it was a collective failure on so many fronts, that what happened in Afghanistan on August 15, but it was not just developments of that one particular day, but I think one should look into some of the mistakes happened way back in 2001, but most importantly the developments since 2018 and onwards with the peace process in Doha. I think Afghans are to be blamed, I would say, the leadership in the previous government, administration, as well as other Afghans. But at the same time, other players, including the United States and others. But fast forward, I would probably talk about the future, because that's what matters most to all of us. I think the Taliban took over Afghanistan, an Afghanistan that is way different than the country that they ruled in the 90s for 5 years. It's a much different country when you look at the population. Similar to Pakistan, Afghanistan has one of the youngest populations in the world. 2/3 of Afghans are under 25, probably the youngest in the entire world outside sub-Saharan Africa. Afghanistan of today, the young Afghans have grown up with different sets of values and beliefs, and free media, civil society. When you look at the Afghan women protesting in Kabul, that is a very strong indication of how powerful the Afghan women are today, given the circumstances, of course. But also this Afghanistan of today is way more connected than it was 20 years ago. So the fact that a lot of these Afghans are probably not taking arms against the Taliban can be seen as a sign of maturity and awakening as well, instead of basically repeating the same mistakes. Kabul destruction in the 90s clearly had no winner. But on the negative developments, I think Afghanistan, today we are on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. 90 million Afghans are facing emergency level of food insecurity. More than 5 million children under 5 face acute malnutrition. There is brain drain, human capital flight. Middle-class Afghans, a lot of elites have left Afghanistan, unfortunately, in the past few months. And then, most importantly, there is lack of trust, confidence, and hope. So that's the Afghanistan the Taliban has inherited. So, what to do with it? I'll start with what the Taliban should do first. I think the Taliban should probably, I think the first thing that they should probably do is to agree to disagree. And for them it's important to transition from a military organization to a political organization. And to get over this victory and celebratory mood and focus on real issues, I think the anti-US hate probably cannot bring food to the dining table of nearly 90% of Afghans who are soon to be below poverty line. Also, that I think it's important for the Taliban to understand the diversity of the country in so many ways: ethnic, language, ideology, and the way of life. In our view, that's the beauty of Afghanistan. You can't turn all of these people into Talibs. Communists probably tried that. They were going after people and individuals who were thinking differently. So one should respect Afghanistan's pluralism, and the governance structure in the future should definitely reflect that. So the winner-take-all attitude, I think, was a mistake in the past 20 years, and it's going to be a mistake if this is going to remain an attitude for the Taliban regime. So engage with the world on so many fronts, including counterterrorism. Being an effective insurgency doesn't mean that you can be an effective counterinsurgency. So they have to address that. I believe this is a pause moment in Afghanistan, and less fighting doesn't mean that a country is less lawless. It has the potential to go to any direction. Last is what the region and what the West should do. I think the region has made some clarity in the talks in Tehran and also here in Pakistan and in Central Asia. It's important to follow up on some of those. There has to be a post-America view on Afghanistan from the region. Americans have left, and the regions are here. So it's important for them to review that. There is, I believe, from some of our neighbors in the north, most predominantly, there is this fear factor when they think about Afghanistan, they think about the Taliban and Afghanistan from a security perspective. So probably the relationship that we see between the Taliban and some of Afghanistan's neighbors is not really genuine. And the West, beyond Afghanistan's immediate neighborhood, should learn from mistakes, readjust, and re-engage. The biggest partner for the international community was the Afghan people, not necessarily a particular administration. So that has to be, I think, continued. You cannot forget 30+ million Afghans simply because you don't like a few people running the country. So the Taliban recognition, I understand, is not something on the table in the international community. In Washington, as well as in Europe and other important capitals around the world. But it doesn't mean that the international community should not engage with Afghans, both the Taliban and others. It's going to be difficult, but I think we also some Afghans might expect policies of regime change, which I don't believe it's there. But I think that very much depends on what kind of clarity the Taliban will demonstrate in the way that they would like to govern Afghanistan. So Taliban were known to be this quick decision maker. But what we see in the past 3 months is that they are having a hard time making decision about how to rule Afghanistan.
Lotfullah, let me just quickly ask you, these tens of thousands of Afghans who have fled their country are mostly from the educated elite, people who've been benefiting from the presence of NATO, America, the opening of schools and universities, etc. And this entire elite has now fled the country. And there are probably very few people left who are capable of even running the government. How do you are these people going to come back, do you think, at any point in time? what are the Taliban going to do? Because I was quite stunned to see that, in fact, this older generation who now constitute the cabinet have not trained a younger generation to come forward. They have educated Taliban in their ranks, people who've been to university, particularly in Pakistan, and who've qualified, but they are not being used in any way by the Taliban. And instead, what you have this huge exodus of educated people. It's a very difficult situation. How do you see this being resolved?
I think the Taliban. I think the problem is whether the Taliban accepts a different view in their government. I think a lot of Afghans who are still in the country are quite capable of being helpful, but apparently they are not given a chance. Well, about 200,000 Afghans maximum have left Afghanistan since fall of Kabul.
And they are the elite, right?
Well, half of them are security forces and their families, the special forces and those who worked alongside U.S. and NATO forces. And then the other half, are Afghans from all walks of life. Let's say, the media industry in Afghanistan was about 10,000 people. I think probably only something around like 300 to 500 journalists have left. So there are still a lot of journalists in the country. If you see the flow of information, we have documented, or there is more documentation of Taliban atrocities, behavior, activities in the past 3 months, more than 5 years of their rule last time around. So there is so much, I think, being coming out of Afghanistan in terms of information. Although that they are they are putting media organizations under a lot of pressure that I think I'm going to talk about tomorrow in the session on access to information and press freedom. But I think the fundamental issue is that whether there is space for diversity in the Taliban government. If there isn't, then no matter who is left, who is not, non-Taliban Afghans are not part of the structure.
Excluded. Can you run a government with the present educated manpower that is left in Afghanistan, do you think? Even if the Taliban were all amenable to a political settlement and a deal and to be reasonable, are there enough people left in the country who bureaucrats, advisors, technical people?
I think so. I don't think Afghanistan has a capacity issue per se. I think Afghanistan has a political issue, and that's for the Taliban to address. This is right. Forget about other Afghans. The Taliban government, in my view, right now is not even a Taliban-inclusive government within the organization. We didn't get much chance to talk about Taliban and why there are differences among them and how this is going to unfold. I think there is this huge discussion whether this was a diplomatic win or a military win. And that's going to define the way they will govern Afghanistan long term.